Thank you, Doug, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to correct what you said. Okay. I told you that you don't need to say anything, but here's old Frank. And then I said, you don't even need to say old because that's self-evident. But in any event, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to have a part in your series and the focus on Dr. Harrington, his legacy, his life, his ministry, is a subject dear to my heart. I had enormous admiration, respect, and affection for Dr. Harrington. And I always treasured his ministry. I always appreciated his wonderful friendship and especially his beneficial influence on my life. And so when I had the opportunity to be a part of this, I certainly wanted to do it. When I agreed to take on this assignment, I began to call a number of people who knew Frank quite well and saw him from different vantage points. I called them each. There were members of the clergy and lay people in this church, likewise members of the clergy and lay people in other churches. And I asked them each what they had in common was they all knew Frank well. And I asked them each the same question. How would you describe the legacy of Frank Harrington after his 28 years here at Peachtree? The responses were generally congruent, all were laudatory, and there was yet at the same time, it was interesting that almost immediately the focus of the conversation moved from a focus on the legacy to a focus on the man. And I think it's fairly natural because there is so much of the man in the legacy and so much of the legacy in the man. I thought I had heard most of the, if not all, of the Harrington jokes, little stories, anecdotes, but I found you didn't have to talk to many people before you would run into another one. And I talked with Don Harp, the retired senior minister of Peachtree Road United Methodist Church. And Don told me about an incident. Don was in his study at the church one Saturday morning, and it was very, very cold. And he had gone to the church with casual attire and wearing boots. And in the middle of the morning, he got a call from Frank Harrington saying, look, I'll come by and pick you up. Let's go have a sandwich. And Don explained to him that he was not dressed the way Frank would certainly be dressed. And he wasn't sure that was a good idea. Frank talked him into going. And the sandwich shop that Frank wanted to take him to turned out to be closed. And so Frank opted for the Capital City Club. Does that sound like Frank? And when they got there, Frank took him to the door and he was met by the dining room manager. And Frank said, I ask a favor of you. I have this man who is homeless. And I would like to give him a hot meal. And thus they looked me over again pretty carefully, but they finally let us in. But he said, every eye in the dining room followed us as we went down the aisle. But, with that as preface, let me turn to the subject of the morning and begin. In town centers and city halls around the world, there are stone markers memorializing individuals who gave their lives for a particularly worthy cause. And historians tell us that such memorials had their crude, simple beginnings in the medieval period in Scotland, when it was not at all unusual for neighboring clans or tribes to engage in armed conflict. And as young men went off to fight to protect their homeland, it was their practice to each pick a stone, an ordinary stone from the rocky soil, and identify it with their own markings, and then place the stone along with all the others in the center of the city. When the conflict ended and they returned home, each man reclaimed his own stone. And of course, those remaining were left there to memorialize the men who would not return. When Frank Harrington died on March 3rd, 1999, he left a large and imposing memorial stone in the center of the lives of all of us who loved him. It was not a stone you could touch, one you could see, but one very real nevertheless. One beautifully shaped by the depth of his commitment as a servant of God. One highly polished by the warmth of his friendship. And one brightly illuminated by the power of his extraordinary ministry. It was a memorial marker that resides in the hearts and minds, I think, of each of us who knew and loved and were beneficially influenced by the man. I think of that memorial stone as having numerous facets, a significant dimension of Frank's ministry being represented by each one. And I want to comment on just a few. First and foremost, and this is a blinding glimpse of the obvious, Frank's ministry had as its centerpiece the Peachtree Church. Clearly, the centerpiece of Frank's ministry, life, and legacy is the Peachtree Church that he envisioned and worked so very hard to develop. Surely you know the story very well. When Frank came to this church in 1971, Peachtree had a membership of 2,400. And when he died, the membership had grown to a little bit above 11,000. The church had become the flagship church of the denomination and the largest Presbyterian church in North America. Peachtree's income had vaulted from $300,000 in 1971 to $7 million in 1999. And the church succeeded in keeping pace with this rapid growth by expanding the geographic footprint of the campus and by increasing building space for additional programs. All of this during a period when the denomination, the PCUSA, was declining in membership and attendance. But impressive as such numerical comparisons are, the real measure of his ministry, and indeed Frank's life, was in the qualitative, far, far more than the quantitative. It was in the consistent high quality of his preaching and the immeasurable but very certain personal influence on the countless lives he touched and enriched. It was evident too in the clarity of his vision for this church and its vast potential, as well as in the effectiveness of his leadership. Another facet to consider is the development of new churches in underserved areas. Frank Harrington was not content with the rapid growth, the vertical growth of this church. He also wanted to plant seeds to grow the larger church and grow it horizontally. He was passionate about new church development. In fact, it's been said that no minister in the denomination worked harder or enjoyed greater success than did Frank Harrington. And the record bears that out. It shows that during the last 30 years, 34 new churches were started by Peachtree in the greater Atlanta area. And today these new churches have an aggregate membership much, much larger than that of Peachtree. Frank Harrington worked hard not only at developing churches, but also at developing ministers, another facet in his memorial stone. Ed Albright, the retired executive presbyter of the Greater Atlanta Presbytery, said, and I quote, "Frank Harrington was a remarkable instrument for God, calling men and women into leadership positions in the church. He had a unique ability to match up ministry opportunities with the God-given talents of ministers and lay people as well. He also had the ability to help each particular person capture his own vision of the opportunities and challenges ahead. So with this ability and vision, Frank was able to develop an incredibly well-trained staff at Peachtree, each of whom had a deep sense of calling and a powerful work ethic. When congregations around the country were in a position to call a new pastor, a pastor associated with Peachtree was a much sought-after target. Because of this, Frank left a legacy of wonderful pastors who served churches all over the country for years and years, even to this day." End of quote. Frank had an unusually well-developed ability to communicate. Whether it was talking to one person seated across the desk from him, hundreds in the sanctuary, thousands over the electronic media, he was able to communicate with sincerity and clarity and effectiveness, and yes, with joy. The consistent quality of his preaching and the dramatic results it produced were widely recognized and greatly appreciated. And the combination of Frank's unfailing commitment to Christ, his love of the church, his well-developed communication skills, and his deep desire to serve others multiplied the impact of his ministry exponentially. Frank's well-earned reputation made him a much sought-after mentor, teacher, and role model for other Christian ministers and church leaders. He was often called on to lead seminars on sharpening pulpit skills, or administrative capabilities, or pastoring. And there's no way to know the number of ministers who have benefited from this part of Frank's ministry, or the good that flowed from Frank's efforts, or the lessons these people learned, or the encouragement they received. Surely, however, the number is very, very large. Tom Toole, the former senior minister of the Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church in New York City, and now executive director and founder of the Macedonian Mission, which, by the way, is an organization dedicated to the mentoring of especially young pastors, but active pastors. Anyway, Tom provides, I think, an excellent example of Frank's impact and what he was able to do. And I'll read this as he gave it to me, because I think it would lose something if I tried to translate it. And I quote, "When I was a new pastor at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church in New York City in 1994, Frank called to let me know that he would be staying at the Plaza Hotel for a meeting and wondered if I would have time for breakfast. I made time to see Frank Harrington. I was honored that he invited me. And when I arrived at the Plaza Hotel dining room, we chatted briefly, and then at about 8:15, I asked Frank, if you were the pastor of the Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church of New York, at the crossroads of the world, what would you do in the first 5 years? Without missing a beat, Frank launched into a 2-hour idea-filled seminar on creative ideas for ministry. It was like a Harvard Business School seminar on being an entrepreneur in ministry. It was like nothing I had ever expected. I took 21 pages of notes. At 10 o'clock, I realized I had an 11 o'clock appointment back at the church. I excused myself and made a quick call to my office to cancel the appointment and to let them know it would be at least noon before I got back. I came back to the table and Frank had at least another hour's worth of ideas. All in all, I took 28 pages of notes from the master in ministry. And I've used many of these creative ideas in my ministry at Fifth Avenue. To sum it up, Frank Harrington was a visionary leader with a heart for Christ and a passion for the church. And Frank embodied my favorite ordination question that Presbyterian ministers must answer when they are ordained. Will you serve the people with energy, intelligence, imagination, and love? In my opinion, no one answered that question with a more resounding I will than Frank Harrington. And by the way, I still draw on those 28 pages of notes every year in my ministry as a mentor of young pastors. Frank planted a seed of faith in me and in countless others whom he influenced. I only hope that I can bear fruit to the glory of God like he did. He was both a mentor and an inspiration to me. I thank God regularly for the man that I believe was the finest parish pastor of the 20th century, Dr. W. Frank Harrington. The finest parish pastor of the 20th century. Wow. Frank's ministry was a perfect blend of his pastoring and his friendship. He made everyone feel welcome and invited. And I think there is little, very little, if indeed any disagreement. Frank Harrington loved the members of his church, and we, of course, loved him back. When our family joined Peachtree in 1987, I was struck by Frank's practice of ending his weekly newsletter to the congregation by the same sentence each week. You'll remember it, I suspect. Keep us in your prayers, and remember how much I love you. What made that such a powerful statement was that we saw so much daily evidence of that love. Whether in trial or triumph, Frank was there. He was our great encourager. In fact, it is the single word love more than any other that defines the ministry and indeed the life of our pastor and friend. His extraordinary preaching skills, undergirded by that love, touched the lives of countless individuals, leaving on our minds and hearts a desire to be better than we are. And I doubt there is one of us here today who, at least to some degree, doesn't feel that whatever we are better than we might have been had it not been that we crossed paths with Dr. Harrington. Dr. Harrington placed great emphasis on the importance of serving others. I offer a quote, "You are not really living if you are not serving." Another comment, if the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, you need to rake a little harder on your side. I can still hear Frank Harrington's words echoing down through the long corridor of the passing years. It's not enough to know good or to be good. We must do good. And he set a noteworthy example by his own commitment to serve as chairman of the Board of Trustees at Westminster Schools. Likewise, the chairman of the Board of Trustees at Presbyterian College, and as a trustee of 3 other schools. His vision carried well beyond the walls of this church to embrace the community at large. And what better example than the church's initiative in building Habitat for Humanity homes. He was a Habitat board member and one of its staunchest supporters and advocates. And we can be very proud of the fact that the number of homes built by Peachtree has now reached 151 and will continue to increase. He, of course, also gave strong leadership to the Peachtree Tops program, a ministry for young people in the Tuckwood community. And the very fact that now, 16 years after his funeral, this class is honoring his memory with this focus on his ministry, life, and legacy is solid evidence of the fact that Frank Harrington's memory stone still occupies its prominent position in our minds and hearts. And we do well to thank God for this man and for his ministry. I like what Don Hart said in a message to me, and I quote, "How many schools benefited from his support along with the support of Peachtree Presbyterian? How many people went into the ministry because of the influence of Frank? How many couples married by Frank are still married because he instilled the importance of staying together? How many pockets did he help empty with his knack for fundraising? How many people still miss him? Many, many, including this preacher." End of quote. Without question, Frank Harrington left a great, great legacy, an enduring legacy, an enduring legacy. One last thought, and then I'm through. This memorial tribute to Dr. Harrington will not properly honor him, in my opinion, if it does not serve to heighten awareness of our individual and collective responsibility to build on the great legacy that he has left us. It's an awareness that calls on us to love the God that he loved, to love each other as he loved us. It calls on us as Christians and members of this church to come a step closer to one another in a consistent, concerted effort to live out the great promise of Dr. Harrington's dream for this church in God's good time to fully realize its vast, vast potential. Such is the legacy of our beloved minister and dear friend, Frank Harrington. Thanks be to God. Thank you very much. Have I raised questions with you?
Could you talk about his persuasive power when you didn't want to do something?
Well, I'm an easy target. I've always tried to avoid saying no to the church. But Frank, I think, was about as good at it, convincing you of the need for you to do this as anybody I've come across. I think a lot of times people try to apply leverage and maybe even bargain a little. If you'll do this, I'll do that. Not so with Frank. Frank said, look, this is what we got to do, and I need you to do this. Period. I need you to do this. And it's kind of hard to say no when somebody says, I need you to do this. On occasion, I asked him, look, why do you need me? This is a big church. And he would say, Frank, I need you to do this. And I, most of the time, ended up doing it. But, well, you know, the story I told you about Don Hart going to the Capital City Club with him. Don apparently put up a bit of an argument in the beginning, and of course ended up yielding. And, he was a special person, without a doubt. When he walked in the room became brighter. And I think he made us better. A remarkable, complex man. Yes, Carol.
I believe, if memory serves me correctly, you were on the pastoral nominating committee
Yes.
that called Frank to Peachtree.
Yes.
Was that a long search?
No, not as searches go. And one of the barometers I used for making that statement, the Morris Park Presbyterian Church up in Charlotte had been working about a year, I think, to replace their senior minister. When we got started, we started in July of, Frank died March 3rd, of '99. We had our first meeting in July. And Vic began his ministry here on August 1st of 2000. So it was, what, 13 months, something like that. But the Morris Park Church went on for another 2 years. And what the average time is hard to judge, because some churches have a strategy of bringing in someone as an interim, not identified as an interim, but somebody that will be a short timer to get the congregation out of the habit of hearing the person that was there. But I would guess a year and a half to 2 years would not be unusual. Yes.
How did he expand the membership so to become such a huge church? What did he do?
In my opinion, which is worth just what you're paying for it, one word: preaching.
Just word of mouth?
I'm going to back up and say 3 words, or 4 words: consistently high quality preaching. I think is the answer to that. What else?
What's your favorite personal story of spending time with Frank?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. One of the humorous ones that comes to mind, it wasn't a personal one, except in the sense I watched it happen. He was the Thanksgiving speaker at the Rotary Club downtown Atlanta. And he was introduced, all things, by Don Harp. And Don and Frank had a golf game just the week before. And Don, in the introduction, told the club how he had absolutely stomped on Frank Harrington in this golf game. And when Frank got up, he knew he was not going to accept that. And he said, the reason I'm a better preacher than Don is because while I am out there working to produce good sermons and to be ready to preach, Harp over here is out there practicing his putting. But personally, and I'll have a hard time saying this, but some of you will remember we had a serious, tragic deck collapse accident at our house. And I don't know how Frank knew or how he got there so fast. But I was strapped to a board with my head bound so tightly. I couldn't believe how tightly they got that tape around me. But I could not budge. Either way, I couldn't move a thing. I was on a stretcher or gurney out in the yard, as were a number of other people. And how he got there, I even knew about it because the emergency crews had just gotten there. But I felt someone take my hand, and I heard this unmistakable voice. And it was Frank. And I don't remember what he said. I don't know what I said. I kept saying to the emergency people that, look, take the others. I'm okay. I'm just enjoying a splitting headache with this tape. Please, can you remember? Of course, he couldn't. But in any event, the assurance that Frank gave was invaluable. It was a calming, reassuring voice that, in effect, said, it's going to be all right.
Frank, you're the son of a Baptist minister.
Yes.
When the time came for you to switch denominations, what kind of role did Frank play in it, and how difficult was this for you theologically?
I'll answer the second one first. It was extremely, extremely difficult. As a matter of fact, were it not for the good sense and logic and courage and backbone of my wife, I'd probably still be a Baptist because you mentioned I, of course, grew up in Parsonage. I was baptized in the Baptist church. Our children were all baptized in the Baptist church. I went to a Baptist school. I even got my degree from the campus of a Baptist school. Our children, and Ruth and I were married in a Baptist church. And anyway, it went on. But Frank was the reason we came. We had been going to a Baptist church here, and we'd come home and watch the television coverage of Frank's sermon. And I always wanted to hurry up and get home because I thought we were getting a lot more out of the television program that we were watching, the sermon on television than the one in person. And so finally we decided to do it. And it's interesting, we visited, I had never been in this church before until we came to visit the first day to check it out. We sat in the very back corner under the balcony at the very back of the church, last seats in the house. And I was convinced Frank could not see us from there. The next, and we didn't sign the register, we didn't speak to anybody, we slipped in and we slipped out. Because I didn't want the calls coming, because I was still not convinced this is the right thing to do. The next morning, when I got to the office, I had a note on my desk. Would you please call Frank Henry. And I knew he was not calling me about Rotary. But he, of course, somehow found out.
You didn't think you wanted his telephone fixed?
No, I don't think that was it at all. But I agreed to have lunch with him, which one time was a relatively inexpensive proposition. I didn't get any warning about what subsequent lunches would cost when we went with Frank Henry. But we had lunch at the Capital City Club, in fact, at Brookhaven. And I posed questions, quite a number of questions. And he answered with a great deal of enthusiasm each time with each question. And I had known Frank for quite a long time, but not really well. And I left thinking, this is an unusual man. And what I remember being struck by his sense of humor and how well it fit. This sounds funny, but how well his sense of humor fit with what he was saying, and how it, in many cases, fit his ministry. It was just seemingly a natural extension. And you could tell when the comments that were humorous were coming, he would get that, a twinkle in his eye. And, he had some comment to make that was going to be worth listening to. But it was a case of taking a step and never looking back. This church has meant so much to all of us in our family. And,
Well, you and your family have been a blessing to Peachtree Presbyterian Church.
The pleasure and the blessing has been ours. Well, I speak for myself.
If Frank Skinner ever gets to heaven, it'll be because his wife paved the way.
Boy, you are right about that.
She was a saint.
And if I get there, it'll be a surprise to everybody that gets there. Now, I've said, you asked about how persuasive Frank was. I think I told him the last time he asked me to chair the long-range planning committee. I said, Frank, if I go the wrong way, I will know I have gone the wrong way if when I get there they say something about long-range planning in hell. Well, I'm sure you've had enough of this, but if there are any questions you want to pursue, I'll hang around for a bit. But thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you.